Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
In New South Wales, what I've noticed is more and more grandparents were looking after grandkids because of cost of living, because mum and dad had to work. And I just wondered, what were they doing with them? You know, other than watching TV or play school or giving them sugar and lollies, were they actually talking about their faith?
Grandparents can make a difference in the lives of their grandchildren, but intentional Christian grandparents can make an incredible difference. Passing on faith to our grandkids is part of the duty before God. He commands us as grandparents to teach the next generation. Today's guest is Reverend Ian Barnett, the founder of the National Grandparent Movement. We're going to talk about some of the importance of this ministry and how it's supporting local churches to equip and encourage grandparents in discipling the next generation. That's Reverend Ian Barnett, along with my wife Kate and myself, Brett Ryan, for Focus on the Family, Australia. Well, welcome to the program.
Great to be part of it, Brett and Kate. It's a thrill to have a chance to continue the conversation about grandparenting.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background. You're a reverend, so do we have to, bow a certain way for you, or how do we address you?
You can call me Ian.
All right.
Or if you're a music fan, you could, like Paul Simon, call me Al, but it's up to you. So I don't get called Reverend much. I have retired from full-time ministry about 3-4 years ago, and so I am just simply now the former pastor Ian. But I was an Anglican minister for over 30 years in the Sydney diocese and spent time in Sydney, Wollongong, around Castle Hill area, and that was a call that God had on my life over 30 years ago. So myself and my wife went into ministry, and 3 kids later, we've gotten through, and God has shown us many, many different things and the blessing of being involved in ministry.
So tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, married to Rhonda for 43 years. We have 3 married children. And Kate, when you realise your eldest son is nearly 41, you start to realise that, we must be older. We must have been married a few years ago. But they've blessed us with 7 grandkids now, which is great. And the youngest is 4 and the eldest is 16. So I'm now learning more about grandchildren in teenage years, which is very different from when they're little.
Yeah, very much so. Well, we might talk about that at another time, because I think that's grandparenting teens is a lot different, because you can only get so much Bluey and Wiggles, and the teenagers don't sort of embrace that as much.
I was going to say, you need to learn the teen lingo. It's very different.
That's so much, and also the challenge of time with them. But that's who I am. I had been, prior to ministry, involved in the government, working as a government employee in housing and industrial relations before that. And we'd already been married for over 10 years before we went to Bible college, which was in Sydney. But it was a great time, and just to learn much, seen God at work, which has been amazing over the years, which eventually led me to what I'm doing now. So.
Well, that's a good segue. What you're doing now, your ministry in Wollongong was your last parish that you were overseeing, and some of the mission from that flows on beautifully to what you're trying to do with the National Grandparents Movement. Yeah,
which is true. So I was a senior minister at Fig Tree Anglican Church, which is in Wollongong, and several years ago, around 2011-12, we had 3 grandkids, and then all of a sudden we were blessed with another 3 in 1 year.
Wow.
And as I was in my early 60s, I'm hard to believe, Brett, I know that I'm nearly 68, but I started to wonder what was out there to encourage me as a grandparent to actually pass on my Christian faith heritage to my grandkids. And having been in ministry, there's lots of things about parenting, but when I checked out the grandparenting world, especially in Australia, there was a lot on being a grey nomad, on retirement, on superannuation, lots of conferences on going to super conferences about how to invest and things like that. But I couldn't find anywhere where someone was talking about being a godly grandparent and try to encourage or pass on your faith. So one thing after another, because God had planted that seed in my own heart, I thought, well, I might as well start something. So I had no idea what to do, how to do it. Would anyone come? Who knows? And so we started a conference back in 2017.
Right.
And we had about 100 people turn up, which I thought was great at the time, because no one else said, what is this thing? What are you talking about? Why are you talking about grandparenting? But again, looking at society and culture in New South Wales, what I've noticed is more and more grandparents were looking after grandkids because of cost of living, because mum and dad had to work. And especially in the early years, say, 0 to 10, basically. And I just wondered, what were they doing with them? Other than watching TV or play school or giving them sugar and lollies, were they actually talking about their faith? And that was stirring my own heart about, well, is anyone trying to equip them or help them do that?
Yeah.
And so we started this movement, the National Grandparent Movement. And out of that, it's been a whole lot of things have been birthed over the years. And so there's a lot more I can say about that, but that'll,
I know, it's great. We love hearing about it because it obviously is birthing that seed that God has implanted in you to actually put it into fruition and to see it becoming what it is becoming and what it's going to be. It's so important to see parents who, have relied so heavily on looking after the children. There's so much more to it. It's not just the practical looking after them and so I can go to work. It's actually embedding in them a desire for their faith. So tell us a little bit about why it's so important.
Yeah, look, I just, there's a part of scripture, Matthew 9, where Jesus is walking through the crowds and he's looking at them and he uses the phrase, they're like sheep without a shepherd. And he uses the phrase, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And I keep thinking about that and thinking, look, a grandparent's using the time they have. Like, I'm 68, so I don't know what tomorrow brings. Let's be honest about that. I know I'm in the final chapter, final stage of my life. But I wonder, what's the legacy I'm going to leave? Because as a pastor of a church, I've heard lots of eulogies. But I haven't heard many grandkids talk about their grandparents in a faith way. And I just wondered if we could raise up a whole new generation of grandparents to be intentional about the God they know, the Jesus that's actually got them to this stage. That'd just be profound. And maybe, the Jesus Revolution movie certainly reminded me of the passion we had when I was a young Christian. Myself and my wife came to faith over 40 years ago. And we had hopes and ambitions, and we probably thought Australia was going to go through another revival, to be truthful, after the 59 and 68 Crusades and others. But Australia, and I don't know how bad it is in Victoria, but there's less and less people going to church here in New South Wales. There's more and more challenges. There's more and more issues. And grandparents themselves are just wondering, well, what can we do? What can we say? And so I would certainly be able to encourage them and equip them to think through things. To maintain what I would say is an unshakable hope that they can still plant seeds no matter what their journey's been. Because you and I know that our kids have watched us. Our grandkids watch us. Sometimes we may not be the best witness. Can I say that? Sometimes we will get it wrong. And they'll look at us and think, well, and you call yourself a Christian type of thing. But I never believe it's too late to plant seeds or hope. And I want to say to you, look, through my experience so far through running this, and can I say it again, I had no idea what I was doing when I started. And deep down, as a grandparent, I still have no idea what I'm doing in one sense. But there's things you learn.
Yeah.
And there are huge roadblocks our grandkids are facing, which I don't think my kids faced years ago, or that they're different today.
Yeah.
Certainly technologies and gender issues and suicide rates and depression and mental health issues. These are things I don't think were around when my kids were teenagers or little.
Yeah.
Or maybe I was just naive back then. And maybe because you're the parent, you're just not seeing it. But now as a grandparent, you're experiencing far more. And I want to say, look, what we're doing isn't just for grandparents. Parents have come along to conferences and other things, and they've said things like, we wish we'd known about this years ago.
Yeah.
We've had people who've never married who've turned up and said, I now feel that, who are in their 70s, we now feel we have a purpose in life to actually do something with what we know.
Yeah, because it's not only just being biological grandparents, it's also spiritual grandparenting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't know who's listening to this right now, but I'm not convinced that churches are helping this generation.
Right.
Society doesn't necessarily value this generation, as in those over, say, 50 or 60.
Yeah.
It's nearly like, you put them aside and just give them a nice cup of tea and some food and keep them happy. And yet, biblically speaking, there's so much wisdom and experience they have just because they might have grey hair, which Proverbs tells us is actually a sign of great wisdom, there's actually things they can share. And we're living longer, and more grandparents are, can I use it, physically active, spiritually active. You know, Philippians 1 talks about that God will finish the race, the journey He started in our lives, and He hasn't finished with us. People keep saying to me, how's retirement, Ian? And I keep pondering that. I really don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't even know how to respond to that. But I think their expectation is that, oh, it's great, you're doing nothing, you're playing golf, you're going to the beach. And it's like, I don't want to waste my life in that
That's
way.
so good.
Yeah. As Christians, do you ever retire?
Yeah, well, I don't think
because he's
so.
got a job. He's got a job for us to do. It doesn't matter what age we are. And it's interesting you say that. The intergenerational thing is so important for young people and old people. It keeps old people young. It helps mature young people and gives them insight. I remember one of our sons, when he was 12, he decided he wanted to play golf instead of soccer. And I'm like, well, this is an interesting move. And so anyway, his favourite thing to do was to play 4-ball with the men who were retired.
Wow.
And so he would get back in the car totally inspired by these men. You should hear about John, he'd say. You know, he's been married for this long, he's got this many grandchildren, and he would talk about their lives. He said they're so interesting. And so add in faith and you go, you've got a great combination. If churches can see the importance of this cross-generational pull, really, because there is a pull. There is a pull for the younger generation to feel loved, supported, and sometimes there can be this, you know, head-to-head sometimes with parents. And the grandparents can be there to back those parents by speaking into the lives of their children, not against the parents, but supporting what they want to do. And I think that is a big thing to understand, that we're not to bag the parents, go across the parents' line. One saying that I've heard recently was, we are to close our mouths and have the welcome mat out, because it's not our job to parent the grandchildren.
Kate, I'm always telling people that, especially through the grandparent ministry, we have to realise we're number 2, not number 1. And so therefore we have to make sure we honour the parents, not speaking against them. And look, the other issue here is that we're living in a time where there is a high divorce rate with both Christian and non-Christian people. And so there's challenges that flow out of that. And there's research, it's in America, I don't know if that's good or bad. Australians haven't really done that much research about spiritual grandparenting, can I say? But they have done a lot in America. And the research indicates that grandparents can actually say things that parents can't say. And not only that, the kids will often listen more to the grandparents than the parents. And we experienced that the other day talking to our youngest granddaughter, Matilda, who's 6. We pick her up from school once a week, as we do. And she said, Granddad and Nana, do you like being grandparents? And I said, darling, it's fantastic. We love it. We get to talk to you. We get to share our life together. And we had that conversation. And I said, well, what do you think? What's it like having us as grandparents? And really, without hesitation, she said, it's great because Mum and Dad are always telling us what we can't do, but you allow us to do so much more, and you're so fun, and you share things with us. And it's like there's such different roles.
And even very much so.
The same for me as a parent. You're telling your sons, drive carefully, fill the car up with petrol. Don't do that to your brother. Don't do that to your sister. All those things.
Well, there's so much good content just there in what you just said. But we're going to just have a little bit of a break. That's Reverend Ian Barnett. He's the founder of the National Grandparents Movement. And you're listening to Focus on the Family, Australia.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
Well, welcome back. We're speaking with Reverend Ian Barnett. He's the founder of the National Grandparents Movement, and you're listening to Focus on the Family, Australia. Now, before the break, you were talking about, mature age people are the church's best kept secret. They're not tapped into, but we're also seeing that you mentioned earlier about the change of culture, and people who used to go to church aren't going to church now, and that can cause a lot of pain and heartache, especially if you see your children not going on with their faith, and then that as a result their grandchildren don't get the opportunities. And that's the reason why talking about this is so important. You're not obsolete, you've got a job to do. Tell us a little bit more about that and how it leads into starting this conference.
Yeah, look, I think there has to be a foundational belief to start with, that we believe in the power of prayer. I want to say that right up front. I don't know that I've grown up in a time in my own context where Christians continued to inspire me and stir me about trust God and continue to pray to him. He knows what he's doing, even when you don't see it. And also be confident of the seeds that have been sown. The day will come that God can use that. Again, even if it doesn't happen in your lifetime. I'm someone who visual, but God, I want to see it happen today. There's things around me with kids and grandkids. Can't you just save them tomorrow? Because I'll sleep better at night. Now, it nearly comes to the old question, but if I was God, I'd just make it all right in one go. And so what we're noticing more and more with grandparents is they're concerned for their grandkids. Their kids have, it's probably too strong a word, but rebelled against their parents' faith. Either because they feel their parents have shoved it down their throats, or they had to go to a Catholic school or a Christian school, whatever it might be. And now our culture and university has changed so much. And where we're living and the time we're living in, technology, I've got to say we're doing this through technology. So what a blessing it is. It has its challenges because it really is taking kids down the wrong path. And it's not helping them, again, reset about what is right and wrong and things like that. And so grandparents continue to get concerned about how do we get access to grandkids when our own kids don't want us to talk about our faith, when there's obstacles and roadblocks. Hence, I've got to keep saying, look, you've got to keep praying for them. Think of milestones, birthdays, major events in their lives. And again, my wife is a far stronger prayer than I am, but she'll ask the kids, especially the ones that have phones now, and I've got to say, whether you like it or not, once your kids get phones, etc., you've got to think about this is a new way I can connect with them.
Yeah.
Because you're now going directly to them.
Yeah.
You can ask in the exams coming up, what's happening at school. You can have different conversations that maybe you've forgotten the conversations you had with your own kids. And we're noticing, and as others are saying the same thing, that there's a new door opening with connection. Yes, technology is helping that. But it's just, I've got to say, it's hard work. When I think of harvest time, I'm sure I don't know whether you guys have a farming background. I don't.
No.
But when it was harvest time, I'm thinking of the farmers who had to work long hours. It was hard work. I've got to say to you, I keep asking for God's strength because it's still harvest time, especially spiritually and soul-wise. And I think we said it earlier, and Kate and I said, our work isn't finished because I've turned 60 or 70 or something.
Yeah.
And I even want to say, Brett, it could be that our greatest work is now as grandparents.
Yeah.
Because we control the time, no matter what you do with it. You know what's coming up next, but you want to see your grandkids and kids in heaven with you.
Yeah.
And so that means you can talk, pray, you can engage, you can celebrate, you can use technology for your advantage. Don't ever give up on hope is my view. So there's just some quick things.
Yeah, quick story that I wanted to share. Brett's father was retired when we had our children. So he retired, I think it was at 60. And we had 3 boys. So our plan was to always have the grandfather speaking into our boys' lives and it not just be Brett. We wanted them to have a close relationship with him. So when there were times where they felt they couldn't go to Brett, they could go to him. And he actually passed away when our eldest was 14, maybe. And boy, the sadness that brought to our boys, but the impact he had on their lives.
The legacy.
Oh, the legacy is unbelievable. So our youngest was 9. And anyway, look, the impact of that grandfather, and he would pray with them, he would laugh with them, he would go to their sport. He was so engaged.
You earn the right to speak into their lives.
And just, I can't tell you, when our eldest was going through a really tough time and Brett's dad had passed away, he actually went to his grandmother's house so that he felt connected to where his grandfather had been. And he said, I just sat in that, and he stayed there for 3 days actually, just to be near where his grandfather had been. And so just the beauty of that for us to go, he was so connected with the grandfather and his faith.
Yeah.
Was just extraordinary.
So more about that legacy, and it's so important to hear those stories, and we need to be encouraged and sort of challenged as well. What input, what legacy, and that's the reason why you started the NGM, the National Grandparents Movement. So tell us a little bit about the vision, the mission, and the values of that ministry.
Yeah, look, right up front, we're hoping to equip and encourage over 30,000 grandparents to be intentional.
Wow.
And that's the key word, to be intentional. Don't let go what you have. Nearly under the banner of the goodness of God, Brett, surely somewhere we have tasted over the lifetime we've lived the goodness of God in the good days and the bad days. Maybe that can be captured by Psalm 23 because we're confident no matter what we go through that God is there. But we need to be able to share that. And so our vision is to equip over 30,000 grandparents around Australia to be intentional, to get churches to take up the baton of actually running grandparent ministries as well, because there's a range of tools that we have and that others have. We're connected with something called the Legacy Coalition in America, who the CEO of that, Larry Fowler, is a great encourager of mine and others, where you can actually run courses and give people tips about how to be a grandparent, how to be effective. Yeah. I don't think we think about, I'm now a grandparent. Like before I got married or during my married years, I was reading books about what does it mean to be a man, a father, and a husband. I haven't found that much about, well, now that I'm a grandparent or a grandfather, what do I do? And so we can equip, and so we want to get churches to take up that. I'd love to think that ministers, and this is part of the challenge, let's just assume that ministers and pastors are super busy people.
Let's assume.
Let's assume it. Yeah, I was about to say.
Another email about another thing. Yeah, sometimes maybe it gets deleted, and they think, look, we have a seniors ministry and we have a lunch once a month. That's it. There's got to be more than that. Yeah. Like we've known the Lord for 40, 50, 60 years. Surely there's something we can say.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing as grandparents get older, they actually do get more emotional because they realise what they're facing or what the generations following them are facing. And there are things that they can share that can help. And I just like, even if churches did interviews or encourage them to actually pass on. We know people who are not grandparents. And you said it earlier, they're a grandparent in their local context. They're involved in kids ministry. Yes, physically it's harder.
Yeah.
As you get older, it's easy to get down, but it's very hard to get up again. Your body changes. But as you walk with kids, as you talk with them, as you engage, it's amazing the conversations that happen.
Yeah.
And it's funny, my second son is a pastor in Sydney. He's followed in his father's footsteps, for better or worse. And in his sermon the other day, and it's funny how I didn't know this, my son's 39, and he was sharing about back in 1995 when my dad, his granddad, died. And my dad was in our house, we're having lunch, and he got really unwell. We had to call the ambulance, and he went to hospital. And my son James shares that for him, at the age of 10, he actually went to his room and prayed that God would heal him. Now, Dad died 3 months later. And James only told me the other day that that was the first time he felt that God didn't answer prayer. He always assumed that God would answer prayer. But that stuck with him. And it's reminded him about not that God didn't answer the prayer, but God had a better plan for his grandson.
Yeah.
My dad was a follower of the Lord, and so he knew now that he was going to a better place. But there are just connections, even with grandparents who you may not see. And we can talk about a couple of things for long-distance grandparenting, which is a challenge. But there are just ways we can encourage people to think, speak, act. Often I think Australians, we go with the least amount of resistance. A lunch once a month is fine. It'll keep them happy.
Yeah.
And I just think, I don't want to be just kept happy. There must be something more. And look, we were fortunate. We actually launched a book last year called Footsteps for Future Generations. the Faith Legacy Grandparents Leave, and it's a book that's available through various bookshops. We had different people put chapters in, and that's been very encouraging. So we've even launched a book now through the Grandparent Ministry, which is the first one of its time. So, yeah, it's great.
And this conference you put together, you can either go face-to-face or you can do it online, which makes it so it's nationally accessible.
That's correct, yeah. So we've got people now around Australia, and we've encouraged churches to get groups together, which is great. So people are getting groups of 10, 20, 30 together, and they're live streaming because we live stream it. We've got people in England, America, all sorts of places now watching it, which is great. And so it's been very encouraging to see that expansion. And really, what we're noticing, that's where the growth is. Fantastic. It actually is through online. So, yeah. That's
excellent. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. And I think we should have you again for another conversation about the importance and some of the challenges of grandparenting. Would you be able to do that with us?
I'd love to.
Fantastic. If you'd like to find out more about the National Grandparents Movement, you can go to the website at ngmlegacy.com.au. That's ngmlegacy.com.au. And we at Focus are proud to partner with NGM, and we've put together a grandparents toolkit, and you can find articles and resources and podcasts, including keys of grandparenting and how to face some of the challenges of distance or estrangement. You can go to our website at families.org.au. On behalf of Kate and the rest of the team, I'm Brett Ryan, inviting you to tune in for another edition of Focus on the Family, Australia.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.